you ever looked at freshly whitewashed tree trunks in November and wondered what you were actually looking at? Is it just a nod to tradition, a leftover from Soviet Subotnik workdays, or is it genuinely a vital garden procedure? Most gardeners are absolutely convinced they're doing it right. But in reality, 99% of them are making one single, fatal mistake that turns all their hard work into nothing more than pointless decoration. Today, we're not just talking about whitewashing. We're going to completely debunk the biggest myth in gardening. I promise you by the end of this video, you will look at that white brush and bucket of lime with completely different eyes. And the main question we'll answer is this November whitewashing actually necessary? And if it is, how do you make it genuinely effective and not just for show? Let's find out. Let's be honest. For many of us, the sight of whitewashed trees along roadsides and in parks is deeply nostalgic, instantly bringing us back to our childhoods and those mandated spring or fall clean-up days. This tradition is deeply rooted in the Soviet past, where mass whitewashing was a standard part of community beautification efforts. And this is where the first trap lies. Because it was so widespread and mandatory, the actual essence of the procedure became diluted, turning it into a formality. People applied the whitewash simply because it had to be done, without truly understanding the purpose. It was widely believed that it was purely for aesthetics, to give the area a well-maintained look. This stereotype is so ingrained that many summer residents still grab their brushes in the spring, just before the May holidays, simply to make the garden look tidy and festive. But agronomy is a science, not an aesthetic choice. The true purpose of whitewashing has nothing to do with beauty. It is first and foremost a protective measure, a kind of sunscreen and winter jacket for the tree, all in one. To understand how it truly works, we need to forget the mandatory cleanup days and focus on biology and physics. So let's look at the real primary threat that whitewashing is designed to protect trees from. And surprisingly, it's not just pests or the deep freeze itself. It's the sun. Specifically, the intense sun of late winter and early spring. Picture the scene, February or early March. The sun is bright during the day, and the tree's dark bark, especially on the south-facing side, absorbs a tremendous amount of heat. The bark can heat up to 50 or even 60 degrees Fahrenheit, 10 to 15 degrees Celsius. Fooled by this warmth, the tree can temporarily wake up, causing sap to start flowing through the tissues. Then, overnight, the temperature plummets, sometimes dropping sharply down to 5 below zero or even -4 Fahrenheit, -10 to -20 Celsius. What happens then? The liquid inside the bark tissues instantly freezes, turning to ice and physically rupturing the cells from the inside out. This results in longitudinal cracks on the trunk, known as frost cracks, and extensive patches of dead tissue, which is essentially sun scald. This isn't just a cosmetic issue. These wounds are open gateways for infections, fungi, and pests. The tree has to expend massive energy reserves trying to heal itself, which weakens its overall health, leads to poor fruiting, and can potentially kill the tree entirely. That vicious fluctuation in temperature, that's exactly what the white paint protects against. So, we've identified the main threat. Now let's explore exactly how the defense mechanism works. How can simple white paint save an entire tree? This is where basic physics, the stuff we all learned in school, comes into play. Dark surfaces absorb sunlight and consequently heat. Light surfaces, especially white ones, reflect it. By covering the trunk and the base of the main structural branches with this white mixture, we create a highly reflective screen. This shield prevents the tree's bark from overheating on sunny winter days. As a result, the temperature differential between the sunlit and shady sides of the trunk, as well as the fluctuations between daytime and nighttime temperatures, becomes far less dramatic. The white trunk won't heat up as intensely. This means the tree won't wake up prematurely, sap flow won't start, and the subsequent night frosts won't inflict fatal damage. Essentially, we're simply helping the tree survive the most dangerous and unstable period, the transition from late winter to early spring, by keeping its vital bark intact and undamaged. It's elementary, really, but that is the entire secret behind effective whitewashing. It's not a cure, it's pure prevention. It's truly a shield, a suit of armor against solar radiation. Now for the most important and often debated question: when should you actually whitewash your trees? Fall or spring? The answer from agronomists and experienced gardeners is unanimous and clear. Tree trunks should only be whitewashed in the fall, specifically in November. And here is the reasoning why. Remember what we are trying to prevent: sun scald and freeze damage or frost cracks that typically occur in late winter, usually February and March. For the protective layer to work, it must already be on the tree before this critical time. Applying the coat in the fall, October or November, right after the leaves drop, is exactly what solves this problem. You apply a protective barrier that works throughout the entire winter and into early spring. So what happens if you wait until spring, say April or May? By that point, the worst of the damage has already occurred. The February and March sun has already done its damage and the bark is compromised. Whitewashing in the spring is purely a cosmetic measure. Sure, it can cover up existing cracks and give the garden a neat, tidy appearance just in time for spring holidays, but it completely fails to fulfill its primary protective function. It's essentially the equivalent of wearing a heavy winter coat in April after the cold weather has already passed. So, remember this golden rule: whitewashing is a full procedure. Anything done in the spring is just damage control and self-deception. Let's debunk another popular gardening myth right now, that whitewashing protects trees from all pests. A lot of people believe that if you paint the trunk white, no caterpillars or beetles will climb up the tree. Unfortunately, this is a major misunderstanding. Whitewash is not a literal insecticide. It won't kill aphids, codling moths, or sawfly larvae. Most pests that damage the leaves, flowers, and fruit will easily bypass this white barrier, or simply fly directly into the canopy. However, there is a kernel of truth to this myth. Whitewashing does help control certain types of insects. It primarily targets those pests that overwinter in bark crevices. When you prepare the trunk for whitewashing, a process we'll discuss later, you mechanically scrape off that old dead bark. And when you do that, you remove the egg clusters, pupae, and larvae of many serious pests, such as the codling moth or various mites. Furthermore, the lime or paint itself seeps into micro cracks, creating an unfavourable alkaline environment. It literally seals off the overwintering pests, preventing them from emerging in the spring. So, whitewashing isn't a silver bullet or a cure-all, but it is a valuable part of a comprehensive pest control strategy. Moving on from pest control, we need to discuss diseases. Can whitewash truly protect a tree from fungal and bacterial infections? The situation here is similar to what we discussed regarding pests. Whitewash itself is not a systemic fungicide. It won't cure established diseases like apple scab, manila, or black canker. However, it does play a vital preventive role. First, as we've already established, whitewashing prevents frost cracks and sun scald. These injuries are the main entry points for pathogens. No wound, no infection. Second, many traditional whitewash formulas include copper or iron sulfate. These substances have a strong fungicidal or antifungal effect. They disinfect the surface of the bark, eliminating fungal spores, moss, and lichens. Lichens, while not harmful to the tree themselves, create a moist, protected environment underneath their structures. This environment is perfect for pests to overwinter and for disease-causing microorganisms to thrive. Therefore, high-quality whitewashing, using the right additives, effectively disinfects and sanitizes the trunk, significantly lowering the overall pathogen load in your garden. Another critical aspect that often gets overlooked is rodent protection. During winter, when natural food sources are scarce, young saplings and even mature trees often become prime targets for rabbits and mice. They strip the bark right off the base of the trunk, sometimes completely girdling the tree, which inevitably leads to the tree's death. So can whitewashing help here? Partially. Lime or paint alone won't deter a truly hungry animal. However, Some modern tree paints include special repellents, substances that have a taste or scent unpleasant to rodents. Additionally, traditional or folk whitewash recipes often suggest adding very small amounts of carbolic acid or creosote to repel mice and rabbits as well. But it's important to remember that this isn't a 100% guarantee. If you have a high rodent population and it's a harsh winter, they might just ignore an unpleasant smell. Therefore, whitewashing should only be seen as a supplementary protective measure. The primary defense against rodents, however, involves installing physical barriers, such as special wire mesh guards around young tree trunks, or wrapping them with materials like roofing felt, burlap, or evergreen branches that the animals simply cannot chew through. So, we've settled on autumn for whitewashing. But what exactly is the perfect window? November is a pretty broad term. The key here is catching the ideal moment. The most important condition is that the tree must have fully ended its growing season and entered dormancy. The surest sign that this has happened is the end of leaf drop. As long as a tree still has leaves, active processes are running, and you shouldn't disturb it. The second crucial factor is the weather. You need to carry out the work on a dry, frost-free day. Ideally, the air temperature should hover around 2 to 3 degrees Celsius. Why is this so vital? If you whitewash during rainy weather, the mixture will simply wash right off the trunk before it has a chance to dry and set properly. Conversely, if a hard frost hits, the water-based paint will freeze instantly, either in the bucket or on the brush. It will form an icy layer on the trunk that will inevitably crack and peel off later. That's why you need to monitor the forecast carefully. Choose a dry, pleasant day in mid or late November, once the leaves have all fallen, but before the severe freezes start. That precise timing ensures the whitewash goes on in an even coat, dries thoroughly, and adheres reliably to the trunk throughout the entire winter. Before you even think about picking up a paintbrush, you need to tackle the most crucial and often overlooked step, preparing the trunk. Applying whitewash to a dirty trunk covered in moss and old bark is simply a waste of time and money. The protective layer won't adhere properly and will peel off along with the dead tissue after the very first rain shower. Start by grabbing a non-metallic scraper to ensure you don't damage the living wood underneath. A stiff brush, or if the bark is loose enough, just use thick gloves. Gently but thoroughly remove everything that easily flakes off the trunk and the base of the main scaffold branches. This includes old cracked bark, mosses and lichens. Be careful not to scrub too hard. It's best to do this when the weather is damp, as the materials lift off much easier. Crucially, make sure you lay down a sheet of plastic or a tarp underneath the tree. This is essential for collecting all that debris, along with the pests overwintering inside it, so you can properly gather and burn the waste instead of leaving it in your garden. Once cleaned, inspect the trunk carefully. If you find any visible wounds or cracks, you must clean them out down to the healthy wood. Treat the area with a copper sulfate solution or a similar disinfectant, and then seal the damage using tree wound dressing or garden pitch. Only after completing all these steps is the trunk truly ready for whitewashing. Once the trunk has been thoroughly cleaned and prepared, you can move directly to the actual whitewashing process. But even this seemingly simple step has its nuances. First, how high should the application go? A common mistake is coating just the base of the trunk, only about 20 inches, 50 centimetres, up from the ground. That's simply not enough. You need to paint the entire main stem, from the soil line all the way up to the first major scaffold branch. You should also coat the bases of those large scaffold branches for about 1/3 of their length. These are the exact parts of the tree most susceptible to sun scald. Second, what consistency should your solution have? It can't be too runny, otherwise it will just stream down the trunk, leaving thin, transparent streaks that require 3 or 4 coats to fix. However, you also don't want it too thick, like spackle or plaster. A heavy, paste-like application will form a thick crust that quickly cracks and flakes off. The ideal consistency is similar to heavy paint or thick buttermilk. This texture ensures the mixture applies smoothly, resists running, and creates a dense, even protective layer. It's easiest to apply the whitewash using a wide utility or masonry brush making sure to work the mixture thoroughly into all the cracks and crevices of the bark. Now, let's move on to the most important part, the whitewash material itself. Generally, you have three primary choices: traditional lime wash, exterior latex paint, and specialized acrylic garden paint. Let's break down the pros and cons of each. The lime wash is the oldest and cheapest method. It's prepared from slaked lime, calcium hydroxide. To help it stick better, people typically add things like clay, casein glue, or wallpaper paste, and copper sulfate is often included for disinfection purposes. The pros: it's inexpensive, readily available, and highly vapor permeable, meaning the bark can truly breathe underneath. The cons: it's not very durable and washes off easily in the rain. Often, by the time spring arrives, there's nothing left of it. Exterior latex paint is a slightly better option. It lasts longer than lime, but it comes with a major drawback. Many of these paints create a vapor impermeable film on the trunk. This film can cause the bark to sweat and rot, which is particularly dangerous for young trees. If you choose this type of paint, you must look for a product specifically labelled breathable. Finally, modern acrylic garden paints are arguably the best choice. They are specifically formulated for trees, meaning they last a long time, provide excellent sun protection, allow the bark to breathe, and often already contain fungicides and other beneficial additives. If you've decided to go with this budget-friendly option, let's take a closer look at the classic lime wash recipe. To ensure it's effective and adheres properly, simply mixing lime and water won't cut it. Here is a proven recipe for 10 litres of water. You will need 2.5 kilograms of fresh hydrated lime powder, half a kilogram of copper sulfate, 1 kilogram of high-quality clay, and 100 grams of casein glue. Start by dissolving the copper sulfate in a small amount of hot water. Next, in a separate bucket of water, prepare the lime. Add it gradually while constantly stirring. After that, add the clay. The clay provides viscosity and prevents the wash from running off too quickly. Mix everything thoroughly until you have a smooth, homogeneous paste, free of lumps. Finally, pour in the dissolved copper sulfate and add the glue for improved adherence. Once mixed, allow the solution to sit and steep for a couple of hours. The clay and the glue play a crucial role here. Without them, your whitewash will simply wash away after the first heavy or prolonged rain. This specific composition not only protects against sun scald, but also helps disinfect the bark. Let's talk about a more modern approach. Using ready-made, commercially available garden paints, usually acrylic or water-based formulas. Why are many gardeners switching to these despite the higher price tag? First off, convenience. There's no need to mix anything or worry about getting the proportions wrong, risking a mistake. You simply open the container and start painting. Second, durability. High-quality garden paint lasts on the trunk for 1, sometimes even 2 years. This means a single autumn application will cover you for a long time. It won't wash off in the rain or crack in freezing temperatures. Third, the composition. Manufacturers have already built in everything necessary: fungicides to protect against disease, insecticide, additives to ward off pests, and sometimes even rodent repellents. You don't have to purchase these components separately. And most importantly, good quality paint creates an elastic, breathable coating on the trunk. It protects the bark while still allowing it to breathe, ensuring it doesn't restrict the tree's girth growth. When selecting a product, always look for labels like garden grade, for trees, or breathable. This guarantees that you won't harm your orchard or garden. Do you really need to whitewash every single tree in the garden? No, you don't. There's a crucial rule here that beginners often forget, and as a result, they end up harming their plants. It is absolutely essential not to whitewash young trees and saplings that have smooth, immature bark. Why? Because lime and even certain paints can be too aggressive for them, potentially causing chemical burns to the delicate bark. Furthermore, a thick layer of whitewash clogs the pores on the young trunk, disrupting gas exchange. This ultimately slows down the sapling's growth and development. It is much more effective to protect young trees from the sun and rodents using alternative methods. Wrap the trunk with special horticultural tape, a bandage, white garden fabric, or even just several layers of newspaper. You should only start whitewashing trees once their bark has hardened, become rough, and develop small cracks. This usually happens around the tree's 3rd or 4th year, depending on the specific species. However, mature fruit trees, like apples, pears, plums, and cherries, must be whitewashed. They are the most susceptible to the risk of sun damage and sunburn. What should you do if, for whatever reason, you can't or don't want to use traditional whitewash? Are there alternative methods for protecting tree trunks? Yes, there are, and they can be quite effective, especially for younger trees. The most popular method is trunk wrapping. You can use various materials for this purpose. Burlap or white spunbond fabric, cut into wide strips, works great. These are wrapped around the trunk, starting from the ground up to the first branches. This type of material provides excellent protection from the sun, allows air circulation, and doesn't prevent the bark from breathing. You can also use special plastic mesh guards designed to deter rodents. As a bonus, these guards offer some light shading as well. Some gardeners use spruce or pine boughs, securing them to the trunk with the needles pointing downward. This provides a good defense against both sun and rabbits. However, you must strictly avoid using dark materials like roofing felt or black plastic wrap for trunk protection. These materials cause the trunk to overheat even more severely than if it were unprotected, which can lead to the bark decaying or rotting. These dark materials should only be used around the very base of the trunk for protection against rodents, and never for sun protection. Let's talk about colour choice. Why specifically white? Couldn't we just use other light shades? Theoretically, yes. Any pale hue will reflect sunlight better than dark bark. However, white is the absolute champion when it comes to reflectivity. It bounces back the maximum amount of solar light and heat. That's why using pure white is the most effective approach for whitewashing trees. Attempting to use pigments to give the whitewash a different colour is ill-advised, perhaps even harmful. First, it diminishes the protective qualities of the coating. Second, we don't fully know how the chemical makeup of added pigments might negatively affect the tree's bark over time. The rule is simple. Your whitewash must be as pure white as possible. When you're buying ready-made paint or a lime mixture, pay close attention to its opacity or coverage and its brightness. A quality mixture should provide a dense, rich white coating with just a single application. If the whitewash looks grey or translucent after drying, its protective effect will be minimal. You'll end up applying multiple coats, which simply increases your material usage and wastes your time. Let's look at another common mistake related to the whitewash mixture itself. Some gardeners, trying to make the whitewash last longer, add silicate or wood glue to the mix. You should definitely avoid doing this. These types of glues form an airtight film on the trunk surface. A tree, just like any living organism, needs to breathe, and it does so partly through its bark. If you block off the air supply, you can cause the cambium layer to die off. The cambium is that thin layer of living cells right under the bark, responsible for the tree's growth in diameter. This can severely weaken the plant and potentially even kill it. Instead of harmful glues, you should add specific, tree-safe components to help the lime mixture stick. These options include the aforementioned casein glue, starch-based wallpaper paste, or even traditional remedies like milk, whey, or household soap diluted in water. These alternatives improve the adhesion of the whitewash without disrupting the bark's vital gas exchange. If you are using pre-mixed, ready-to-use garden paints, there's no need to add anything at all. The manufacturer has already ensured they are durable and safe. But what about our conifers? Should we be whitewashing spruces, pines, or arbor vitae? The short answer is a definitive no. Conifers have a completely different bark structure and physiology. Their bark is generally thicker and more resinous, making it much better adapted to temperature fluctuations. Additionally, the lower branches of evergreens often grow very low to the ground, naturally shading the trunk. Applying whitewash can actually clog the resin ducts and interfere with the tree's natural defense mechanisms. The only exception is if a conifer has suffered mechanical damage or severe sun scald. In that specific situation, after the wound is cleaned, the damaged area can be painted with a special tree wound dressing or sealant to protect it from further decay and infection. But prophylactic whitewashing of healthy evergreens is not only unnecessary, it can actually be harmful. So save that bucket of whitewash for your fruit and deciduous trees. A common question among gardeners is whether their fall whitewash will really hold up against the winter rains and thaws. That's a totally valid concern, especially if you used a simple lime-based wash without any adhesive additives. It's true, it might partially wash off. That's why, firstly, it's crucial to include clay and glue in your mixture. These ingredients make the whitewash much more durable. Secondly, if you experience a very wet winter with frequent warm spells, you should definitely check the condition of the coating around late January or early February. If you notice the protective layer has thinned out significantly or completely washed away, especially on the south side of the trunk, it makes sense to apply a quick refresh coat. To do this, you'll need to pick a suitable calm day during a thaw when the air temperature is above freezing. This quick touch-up job will restore the protective barrier and shield your trees from the most dangerous threat, the harsh March sun. Of course, if you use high-quality acrylic trunk paints, this problem is far less common. They typically hold up throughout the entire winter without any issues. A common misconception suggests that in southern regions where winters are mild and severe frosts are rare, there's no need to whitewash trees. This is a dangerous fallacy. The paradox is that solar damage can actually be more severe in the south. The winter sun there is intensely active, and since there is often no snow cover, the dark soil absorbs additional heat. This radiant energy heats the tree trunk significantly. The swing between daytime highs and nighttime lows, even when temperatures don't hit extreme freezing points, can still be sudden and devastating to the bark. Therefore, autumnal whitewashing is just as crucial, perhaps even more so, in southern regions than it is in temperate zones. Snow cover, which reflects light and shields the lower part of the trunk from overheating in northern orchards, is frequently absent in the south. This leaves the tree defenseless against bright sunlight. So, regardless of where your garden is located, the rule remains unchanged. If you want a healthy orchard, autumnal whitewashing is absolutely non-negotiable. To summarise our extensive discussion, let's clearly define once more what proper tree whitewashing truly is. It's not merely painting the trunk white. It is a comprehensive set of horticultural procedures. It begins with correct timing, choosing a dry day in November, after the leaves have dropped. This is followed by careful preparation of the trunk, which involves scraping away old bark, mosses, and lichens. It includes disinfecting and treating any existing wounds. And finally, it culminates in applying a high-quality, breathable, and durable compound to the correct height, covering the entire main stem and the bases of the primary skeletal branches. Only by adhering to all these conditions does whitewashing transform from a purely cosmetic procedure into a powerful tool for protecting your garden. Neglecting even one of these essential stages, for instance, applying the mixture over dirty bark or using an unsuitable composition, reduces the effectiveness of the entire effort virtually to zero. This is a systemic approach where every single detail matters. So, let's summarise what we've learned. Do your trees need whitewashing in November? The answer is a resounding yes, but that's only true if you do it the right way. The biggest, almost shocking takeaway here is that whitewashing in the spring, done primarily for looks, is, for the most part, a total waste of time and energy. All the magic and the real purpose of this procedure lies specifically in the early application of protection in the fall. This protective layer isn't primarily needed for frost or pest control. Its main job is shielding the tree from the deceptive winter and early spring sun, which causes sun scald and painful frost cracks. And here's the key plot twist. The single biggest mistake people make isn't the timing, it's ignoring the necessary preparation. You could buy the most expensive whitewash available, but if you slap it onto an unprepared, dirty trunk, it will simply peel off in a month. Cleaning and disinfecting the bark accounts for 50% of your success. Whitewashing isn't just a quick paint job you do and forget about. It's a fundamental act of care. It's about understanding the biological processes happening within your tree. It's your long-term investment in the health of your garden and your future harvest. Thank you so much for watching this video all the way through. If you found this information useful, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Now I have a question for you. Do you whitewash your trees in the fall? What specific mixtures do you use? And what challenges have you faced? Share your experience in the comments below. Let's start a discussion.